That don't know, this is Dr. It is Faster and Barry. So very welcome here, and I'll continue with the program.
Thank you very much. Well, I enjoy it already very much. And Adrian, I must say that song is fantastic. Is this your own composition? It's not, eh? But, it's a powerful message in that song. And I'm always, I married into an artistic individual. My wife is very artistic, and she does a lot of poetry. She does a lot of music. And as a result, my kids do as well. And so they're composing all the time. And so it's very, very awesome to hear. And it's one of the things I find is that those who are the artistic types are very in tune with their feelings. Have you noticed that? And they're real. And the words of that song today was real. I mean, the idea that we just simply don't share what's on our heart sometimes, or we hold it in, is something that we have and we experience. And no doubt you experience it because I experienced it, because my kids experience it, and I know we all experience it. There's nothing new under the sun, as they say, or as Solomon said. It's great to be here with you. Great to just see the wonders of your mountains. I went for a long walk today, out around, and just kind of looking around. It reminds me a little bit, I guess no doubt it's the time of the year that don't see all of the tops yet because of the weather, but it reminded me a little bit out in Banff, Alberta. Sometimes you can't see all of the top of the Rocky Mountains either. But there's obviously a different feel to the mountains here than they are out west in Canada, because here you've got this, it's not as treed as much as we see out there, but we also have huge, massive rocks. Anybody been to Canada at all? Just one, have you been out to see the Rockies at all? No. But anyhow, it's quite impressive. But this is very, very nice to be able to be here with you and be able to chat and just share. It's all about sharing, isn't it? It's all about, sharing our own walk with the Lord, and so it's great to be here. I have a couple of verses today that I thought maybe what we could do is I could, if you wouldn't mind, we would have a group of you to just look at these few verses for just a few minutes, and then I'll ask you some questions about them. And then I'm going to share you some experiences, some stories. But anyhow, today I entitled, when I got the call to come here last week, I quickly sat down and with my wife, and we kind of jotted down some ideas of what I would say at each of the various appointments. And so today I thought I entitled it, and I just let the Lord lead and guide. Don't be fooled, be smart. And it comes from my own experiences in life, and I'll explain that in a little bit. But the idea of, as a young person, we tend to be rather naive of things. And I'll explain that a little bit too. So what I want to do, I want to have somebody or a group of people. It's kind of hard to get into groups in a pew in a church type setting, but 2 Kings 5, 20 to 27. Can I have somebody say, hey, I'll volunteer, I'll have a group together here, and I'll be the spokesperson. All hands go up at once. There we go. Thank you so much. And so 2 Kings 5, 20 to 27. And the concept I'm trying to get here with that verse is the concept of beware. What do I mean by beware? So just let that percolate a little bit. Okay, someone else. Proverbs 1, verses 1 to 9. Can I have another person? Okay, right here. All right. So Proverbs 1, verses 1 to 9. And here I'm talking about the concept of being wise. Okay? What do we mean by wise? And finally, Psalm 15. Did I see another hand over? Okay, you want to take Psalm 15? So I just give you a couple of minutes, or just a little bit to look at it, and the rest of you can have a look at these verses as well. In fact, what I may do is I'm just thinking here now to make this go along. I'll read out the verses. So the person who's got 2 Kings 5, 20, 27, you go ahead. I'm going to call on you. I'm going to ask you some questions. But I'll share a story while you guys are looking at those verses. How many of you were here yesterday, by the way? And how many of you were not here yesterday? Okay, a few. Okay, so I just want to tell you real quick. I'm from God's country. It's Newfoundland, all right, which is in Canada. But it's an island off the coast of Newfoundland. And so we were living in Newfoundland. We've got one daughter, 2 sons. The 2 sons came at once. They were the price, you got 2 for 1 when that happened. And it was an exciting time. And so we were living in Newfoundland, and the boys' birthday, every birthday, my wife and I, for all of the birthdays, for our daughter or boys, we would make a cake. But it was more than just making a cake. Remember, I'm married to an artist. So we would make a cake. And I mean, making a cake takes a bit of time, especially when you want to make a car or a plane. Or if you want to do something fancy for our daughter, and you make, I don't know what all it was. It was sometimes a dollhouse or whatever. But it's all a cake. And so we kind of kept that up until the kids were like around 10 or more. And so here we are, and it's the boys' birthday. And they are 3 or 4. And so one had a plane and one had a helicopter, as I remember it. And so my wife decided that during the birthday, we would just cut the one cake. And so we chose Adam's cake, and we cut it. And we had it for, celebrating their birthday. And unknown to us, but little Seth was like, he wanted to have a taste of his cake. So the meal was over, the celebration was over, the presents were open, they're all busy doing their thing, and all the adults are in the living room, and we're chatting, and then it was like we're missing someone. We are missing Seth. And so I said, Seth, where are you? And I could hear out in the kitchen these words, I'm not eating any cake. And I go out into the kitchen. And what he had done, he managed to grab the cake on the top of the counter. And he grabbed it with his hand. And he took a big piece out of the cake, and he had it. And I tell you, you could tell he wasn't eating cake. It was all over his face. But he wasn't eating any cake. You know, it's the idea here is the concept of being aware. He was absolutely not aware of himself. You know, the idea that he was lying probably never even occurred to him. Maybe it was the idea that no one would ever know that he wasn't eating cake. I mean, it was obvious. And I think sometimes we ourselves are unaware of who we are. Can I have the gentleman, 2 Kings? How is it that the individual, can you tell us a little bit about that story, and how is the person unaware?
How the person is unaware?
Yeah, so first of all, tell us what the story is.
So the story, Naaman he had a problem. He was healing, right? Progressively. So he comes to Elijah.
Yeah.
Elijah says, we all know this. They go into the river and wash yourself.
Right.
I think it's 7 times.
Mm-hmm.
And when you come out, you will be clean.
Right.
You don't know the power to do that is coming from God. It's not coming from Elijah. And Naaman comes and he's super thankful. He's been suffering with this for a while. He's a rich man. He says, let me pay you for the services. Mm-hmm. And Elijah says, give honor and glory to God. It's not me. I'm just a man.
Right.
I'm just a instrument. And he dismisses it. Go your way. But Elijah's servant, partner, is, I forget the name.
Gehazi.
He's a true businessman. You know, he gets sharp in modern day. He lets Naaman go, but then behind Elijah's back, he follows after Naaman and says, my master changed his mind. You can pay us. And Naaman hands him, I think it's 2 pieces of silver, 2 pallets of silver. And anyway, thinking he's smart, he's going to keep the money. But when he gets back, Elijah says, like, where did you come from?
And he said,
nowhere. You know, it's like, what do you think?
I'm not eating any cake.
Yeah. So Elijah says, listen here, the leprosy that Naaman suffered with, that's going to be on you now.
How many of you remember that story? You see, Gehazi was just totally unaware of himself. He was totally unaware that telling a lie, that somehow he thought he could get away with it. It's extraordinary. I suggest that as a young person, at least it was for me, I was very much unaware of myself. I really didn't understand human nature in many ways, and it's only as we go through life that we understand. And we understand some things in our relationships with each other, who you can trust and who you can't trust. I remember yesterday I shared with you, or I think I did, we lived in an area where pretty much everyone around us were related, and we were pretty much all of the same religious community. We were Church of England, Church on the Hill, and everyone knew everyone, and everyone was related in some way. You know, when you're in small, isolated communities, especially on an island, you tend to have a lot of relatives, right? All kinds of jokes about Newfoundlanders, how they, are interbred, as it were. A lot of cousins, first cousins get married, and that kind of thing. Anyhow, I remember going to church, and I remember seeing my Uncle Jim. Now, we called him Uncle Jim. There was a lot of uncles, but they were like great uncles or great uncles sometimes. And I remember Uncle Jim, so what's interesting is that I always considered him to be a very, very religious man. And it wasn't until many years later that I, as an adult, was in his house, and he began swearing. And I mean, it was like really raw stuff, and I was like, wow, that's not how I had him pictured, you know. You come to church, just like that song, you know, and you're not sharing really who you are, what you're about. And we have this sense that in a way we think we know, but in a way we don't know each other. Because, you know, when we come, we put on our best clothes and all the rest. And we're so unaware. And it's just like Gehazi. He thought he could get away with it, just like my son Seth. He thought he could get away with it. So the point of the matter is this, that it's extremely important for us to be aware of who we are, in the sense that we are all fallible, and everyone has very similar, if not the same, struggles. Alexander Solzhenitsyn, anyone hear that name? One or two people. Well, at least everyone here now will know that name. Very well-known Soviet dissident who suffered in the gulags after World War II, and he was a veteran of the Russian military in World War II. He made a mistake. He wrote a friend criticizing Stalin. Think about that for a minute. Totally unaware that his friend would take the personal letter that he wrote to the authorities to say, hey, this guy has said something against Stalin. Here's the proof. How would you like to have friends like that? Spent many years in the Gulag. He tells the story in his book, books actually, three volumes, huge books. In one of the chapters there, he tells the story of how he woke up one morning to a guard beating one of the inmates that was in the same barrack, as it were, of his. And he had the shouting and the beating and everything was going on. And he said as he laid there on his bed, he got very, very angry. And he was like, I'm going to kill that guard. I'm going to kill that guard. And then, as he lay there thinking about this, he recognized something. He became aware, as it were, of what he had just said. And then he realized that the same hatred that the guard has to the inmate is the same hatred that he has in his heart towards the guard. And he said, it then became evident to him that there is a thread, the line between good and evil runs through every single human heart. The Lord would expect us to understand about human nature. Why is that important? It is important for us, if we are going to live a successful life, to recognize that good and evil is in everyone's heart. Gehazi, ourselves. But what then is the purpose of recognizing that? What's extremely important is that we're able to forgive. Because just as someone who has hurt us, and I'm sure that somebody has hurt you as they've hurt me, that we're able to forgive. Why? Well, because we're not perfect. That's why. And it is only through forgiving are we able to move on. Important for us to be aware. Okay, our next verse is that of Proverbs 1 and 1 verses 9. And the concept I'm looking for here is the concept of being wise. So be aware, be wise, and then we're going to close on being faithful. Okay, who is it that got that one? So how do we become wise? Okay, so the beginning of wisdom is the fear of God, right? It's having that understanding that who God is. The story is told of two individuals who wanted to go to the coast, and it was a rocky coast. It had a huge cliff. In Newfoundland, by the way, we have lots of rocky coasts, and in fact, we refer to, as those of us from Newfoundland, we will refer to it as the Rock. And if you ever visit there, you'll know why. Rocks are everywhere. That's why I guess I like rocks now that I'm in Ontario, where there's hardly any rocks, except for what I can gather in the field. But anyhow, these two individuals went out on this cliff, and they spread out their picnic lunch and all the rest. And as they were eating, one looked over and noticed that there was something flashing just across the water on the other cliff. And they both looked at it for a bit, thought it was quite interesting. So one of the pair, they went up and they got a instrument, and let me just see what exactly that light is. And so they set up the instrument, figured out how far the light was. They figured out the distance. They figured out exactly the lumens of the light, how much light was coming, the intensity, and so forth. And so he got all the data of the science, the metrics of the light. And then the young lady that was with him said, but if you look, it's like flashing in a certain way. In fact, it almost seems like someone is trying to tell us something. It's the Morse code. And so she began to figure out exactly what the message was. And she figured out it was saying, you are on a cliff that is about to collapse. Get up. Now, how does that relate to the concept of wisdom? And that is, it's this. We can gather all kinds of points of data of our experience. We can have tremendous amounts of knowledge. We go to university, we get our degrees, but wisdom doesn't come from data. Wisdom comes from how we use the data. It's very, very different. We can have all the knowledge of the world, but what do we do with that knowledge? And that's where Solomon made it very clear that it is only as we understand who God is and fear Him and step back and see the big picture can we make sense of everything that we experience. This is one of the lessons of life that I certainly have had struggles with because, we tend to look at things in silos, or at least I do. I think my wife is always saying, Barry, but what's your point? And so it's always like, it's not enough just to know the information. And in our conversations from time to time, and I'll be talking about whatever, and she'll say, so Barry, what's your point? And it's that question. What's the point of the information you have? So think about it for a minute. We had an experience over the last several years, 3 years, 2.5 years, 3/4 years, with the COVID experience, for example. And so, the argument, or at least some people say, it's all about, something being designed in the lab and all the rest of it. Now, I'm not here to say one thing or another with respect to that. But what I am interested in is this particular story that I heard this week. And that is that there's a lab in the United States that decided to take the spike protein out of the first version of the COVID-19 and put it into a later variant of the virus, because the latter variant was more contagious than the first. But the spike protein of the later variant was less potent compared to the first spike protein. So they've basically upped this new virus that they put together in its potency. And the question is, my wife would say, so what's the point? We create things and we need to ask, well, why would you do that? How are we getting wise? The concept of wisdom is being able to get all of the bits and pieces and connecting the dots and seeing the big picture. And that's what's so amazing about God. God is all about the big picture, right? It's not just simply that you have riches and you've worked hard and you've got money. Okay, so but what's the point? I'm a fan of Jackie Stewart. Anyone know who Jackie Stewart is? You probably wouldn't. So when I was a kid, Jackie Stewart was the guy who won all of the Formula One races. And he was from Scotland, and he had a lovely brogue. And he was just all talk, and he became a celebrity. And he wrote a book on his life, and the title of the book is Winning is Not Everything. He's a multi-millionaire. All of the various, a number of the people that he raced with, even though he competed against them, he was friends. It's kind of like, in a lot of times in the practice of law, we would go to court and there's a lawyer on the other side, and we'd always refer to the lawyer on the other side as to the judge. We'd say, well, my lord, my friend says such and such, right? Now, sometimes we could be mortal enemies when it comes to the court case, but after the case is over, we would often, well, the idea is to go to the bar, but, I'd go to the restaurant, whatever, we'd sit down, I'd have my water, he'll have whatever. But the reality is there was this camaraderie. And so Jackie would have this camaraderie with his fellow drivers to whom he competed with, and a number of them were killed as a result of accidents on the road. And so he became eventually a very prominent advocate for safety in Formula One races. And so now when you see, they literally would race in tracks that had absolutely no safety barriers, no nothing. And after so many of these people were killed, he just became a big advocate. So the point of the matter is, what happens is you can win all the money. You can win the races. But what's your point? What does it mean? And so he wrote his book, Winning is Not Everything. My dad tells an amazing story. In fact, he never told us this story until I was probably into my 30s. I hate even thinking that. To think that 30 is young. I used to think 30 was old. I mentioned that to you yesterday. It blows me away. But anyhow, so my dad told us this story that happened to him when he was about 12 years old. Now, again, my grandparents on my dad's side were very poor. They were, my grandfather farmed, but it wasn't farming in the sense of growing vegetables, and he would sell some, but he didn't make his living out of farming. It was just to survive. And then he was a laborer and all that kind of stuff. But he was in his 40s when he got his license to drive, and he had a pickup truck. Dad tells me it's a 1954 Ford pickup, Mercury. And so any of you who are into vehicles, and Dad loved that truck. And so one Sunday evening, my grandparents were gone to some family and were visiting. And my dad was there at the house. And the idea came in his mind that he would take the truck for a ride without his parents knowing about it. And so it began raining a little bit. So think about the data points here now. It's starting to get into the late fall. So you're now into a situation in Newfoundland where rain can become ice. And so the truck, he's there, opportunity, rain, possibly ice. Now, wisdom would put it all together, right? And would say, don't bother. But when you are not wise, you will say, this is awesome. I can now take this truck and go for a spin. And so he got the truck and he started driving around. At this particular time, all of the roads in the area were all gravel road, which actually is not a bad idea when we're having freezing rain. And it's quite interesting in Newfoundland when we would have. Hey, you guys ever experienced freezing rain here? Do you have freezing rain? No? So basically what happens, I'm telling you, the rain comes down. It looks like rain. And then when it hits the ground, because the ground is also cold, it literally creates like a sheet, like glass. It'll sparkle. You put a light on it, it sparkles. It's like, and in fact, a couple of years ago at Christmas, our kids were home, and we had freezing rain. And we went out on the road, the boys and I, and we played hockey on the road with our skates. I mean, it's just incredible to watch. But anyhow, but it's horrible because generally it knocks down power lines and all the rest. But anyhow, my dad now, he takes the truck and he drives all the way around the place, and then he goes out towards the main road. And as you go towards the main road, there's a railway track. And he decided, well, he won't go on the main road in case the police are there. And so he turns the truck around. But as he's turning around, one of the back wheels get caught between the railway. Okay? And so he starts, putting it in forward, putting it in reverse, spinning the tire, trying to get it going. And it's not a four-wheel drive, so it's only just the two rear wheels pulling. And he's like, how am I going to get out of this? And so he goes back and forth, and wouldn't you know, he heard a horn of the train. And he got scared. So he got out of the truck, left it on the track, and took off. And as he was going up the hill, because there's a little kind of a grade hill there, he was like, Dad is going to kill me. Dad is going to kill me. If that truck gets smashed, Dad is going to kill me. He runs back down the hill. He gets in the truck, and he starts going forward, reverse, and he keeps on going. He said he was spinning the tires so much. He said there was just the steam and rubber. It was just all over the place. He said he could hardly see. And then he said he saw the train as it made its turn around Batten's Road there, and the light was shining on him. And he was like, I can't let the truck go. And he just kept going back and forth. And finally, the truck got over there, and he just went. And as he did, it went as the train went by. Well, I tell you, we were just absolutely spellbound as we were listening to our father tell this story. The first time he told it. And it was, he never told anyone. He never even told my mother. This was something that he held within him for years. It was like, I don't know, 50 years that he kept that story to himself because he was so obviously ashamed of how crazy he was as a kid to have done that. But again, it was an unwise move. And we all do things that are unwise. Wisdom comes from the Lord, and it's the ability to be able to connect the dots. Important for us to be wise. Okay, now we're going to move on to the final one. That is the concept of being faithful. Psalm 15.
Basically, Psalm 15 was David reflecting on being perfect, in a sense. And the way the verse is structured, it's basically saying you can't be faithful by thinking about the future, but by starting now, by living for now, doing your practices now, and believing now.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Yes, Psalm 15. David says, who can abide in the tabernacle, your tabernacle, who may dwell in your holy hill? And he's talking about the now, as you mentioned. And he who walks uprightly, works righteousness, speaks the truth in his heart, who does not backbite with his tongue, nor does evil to his neighbor, nor does he take up a reproach against his friend, in whose eyes a vile person is despised, but he honors those who fear the Lord. But now here's the part that I think is really cool. He who swears to his own hurt and does not change. You know, when you make a commitment, you need to follow it through. And it's extremely important. I know as a young person, my father would say to me, you know, I'd say, Dad, because he promised he was going to make us a swing set. So when are you going to make us the swing set? And he said, well, by and by. And I hate that. That has become like fingernails on the chalkboard. By and by. You know when by and by was? Never. I said this to him recently, and he's now only 80 years old. I said, Dad, you still never made me my swing set. You know? But the concept, like as a young person, we expect our family, our parents, to be faithful to their word, right? And ultimately, as we talked about yesterday, it's going to be extremely important in your own lives to be faithful to your spouse, to your children, just the same way as you expect your parents to be faithful to you. When I was in law school, it was a very busy time, as you can imagine. Having 3 children in law school, I don't recommend it to anybody, but we did survive it. And I remember being in church, and I got, friends as you do. You're in church, you meet your people of your general age, age group, and all the rest. And there was this one young person who had a wife, family, and it got too much for him. And he left, unannounced. He just left. His wife was left alone with 2 kids, and he just simply vanished, gone. And it was like everybody in the church was talking about it and all the rest of it. Now, I don't know what all the personal issues were, but I remember thinking about that. And one day, in a very low point where I'm extremely busy, trying to study, I bought a window cleaning business because we didn't have enough money. And so early in the morning, I'd be out cleaning windows in the various shops and malls and stuff before I'd go to class, and then go to class and come home and all the rest of it. And it was like a real crazy time. And I remember being at the park, and my wife says to me, Barry, okay, we're ready to go. You go get the car, bring it down. And as I'm coming up to the car, the thought flashes in my mind. What if I do exactly what Joe did? What if I just vanish? Like that was a thought, right? It's a horrible thought, a crazy thought. But it was a thought that occurred. And then it was like, get thee behind me, Satan. We don't know what we would do in any given situation that we find ourselves as we go through life. And I said to my wife after, I said, this is what was in my mind. I said, it was crazy. But you know what happens? And sin is contagious. Did you know that? When you see people doing things, and you'll say, well, that's crazy. But then you find your own life probably in similar circumstances that they face. And then you get tempted, well, they did it, maybe Can you imagine? I can't even imagine, we talk about it every once in a while, because I say to my own kids, I say, look, this is the busiest time in your life. My daughter has 4 kids. 4. She's a very busy lawyer. Her husband is a busy lawyer. And you hang in there even when it hurts for the sake of the kids. And you know what the amazing thing is I found in life as well? Is that, and my wife would, if she were here, she would just absolutely agree. There were times where I didn't love my wife. I can't believe it, but she tells me that there were times when she didn't love me. But we have stayed together because of the principle that you keep your word even when it hurts. And as a result of that experience, as a result of that commitment, I tell you what, there is no greater person, there's no one on earth that I love more than my wife. Amazing. And so I say to you today, as my wife and I were sitting down just last week when we got the call to come to South Africa, I come to South Africa, she wishes she could, was this concept for, okay, what can we share with you that would be from our experience, that could help in any small little way? You may not even remember a word of what I say in the coming days, but you may remember the stories. Because the stories is how the Lord allows us to learn the wisdom that He gives. That's why the Bible is full of stories. The entire gospel is full of stories. But you know what? Let me tell you this. Look for the wisdom of your parents and your grandparents. Listen to their stories. Listen to the heartache that they had. Think of your own experience. And maybe some of you here have had heartache as well. Maybe someone has let you down. But just because they let you down doesn't give you the license to let others down. And that is so key. My dear mother, who passed away last year, she grew up in a family that was, from everyone looking on would say, they are a high family. They're a prominent family in the community. Her father was Justice of the Peace. He was a World War I veteran. He was, in Newfoundland, we had an entire regiment that fought in the Battle of Somme, of which he was there in July 1, 1916, in which the entire regiment was wiped out in 30 minutes. Now, can you imagine being any 19-year-olds here? 19? Okay. Imagine being your age on the battlefield. You have 800 and some odd fellow soldiers, and in 30 minutes, you're in the midst of absolute carnage as the machine guns wipe out the entire regiment. My grandfather was wounded, went over to to England to recuperate, but ultimately they sent him back to the front, and eventually he made his way home. But he was a wounded man. And I mean wounded man, not wounded not only physically, but he was wounded spiritually, morally, you name it. And he did things in that family that are horrendous, and I don't even want to repeat because I'm being recorded. But my mother suffered horribly. But she did not allow that abuse to ruin her family. And as a result, she raised the best she could. I mean, she had, there were issues. She was always very scared, and when you understand her background, you'd understand why. But she didn't allow the sins of her father to ruin the lives of her children. And that is so key. We are all going to be offended. We're all going to suffer abuse from somebody. But that doesn't give us the right to abuse another person or to abuse your own children. So, be aware. Be aware that the line between good and evil runs through every single human heart upon this planet. Be wise and understand that wisdom is connecting all of the data points. Wisdom begins in understanding and fearing the Lord. And finally, it's extremely important for us to be faithful. Be faithful to the calling that God has placed on your life. And even in those low moments, you hang in there, even when it hurts. Because you'll find that as time goes on and you look back at all those experiences, they will enrich your life so that you have a truly happy life. Let's pray. Father God, we just want to thank you and praise your name for being the God who cares, who loves, who cherishes each and every one of us. Thank you for every person here, every family represented. And may you bless them today. And thank you for your Sabbath. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.